Dr. Emmanuel Manny Hostin, an orthopedic surgeon and husband of The View co-host Sunny Hostin, is accused in December lawsuit fraudulently billing insurance. By the way, this is a Daily Caller story I'm reading. The lawsuit alleges Hostin knowingly provided fraudulent medical and other healthcare services in exchange for kickbacks and or compensation, and names him among nearly 200 defendants in one of New York's largest RICO cases.
For more, we go to our chief Sunny Hostin correspondent for a reaction.
Sunny host likely believed she was already living through her worst possible moment. Then Greg, Gutfeld, and Tyrus stepped in and turned the entire situation into an unapologetic public roast. The looming $450 million legal battle involving her husband that barely registered as the opening act. What came next was relentless. Tyrus unloaded with blunt, no-filter commentary, while Gutfeld followed up with rapid-fire sarcasm that landed punch after punch. No pauses, no mercy. Sunny, for her part, maintained a silence so controlled it could have passed for an award season performance. But the calm didn't stop the storm. The real chaos unfolded elsewhere, through resurfaced accounts, escalating legal revelations, and courtroom developments that felt more like a scripted drama than real life that had started as serious legal trouble quickly morphed into a spectacle. One fueled by late-night commentary, biting humor, and a media cycle that showed no interest in easing off. And as the jokes piled up, the underlying controversy only grew louder, messier, and far more complicated than anyone initially expected. This wasn't just criticism. It was a collision of scandal, satire, and spectacle, and it was far from over.
Only about 31% of Americans trust our healthcare system. We have a terrible healthcare system. And, you know, doctors suffer because of big corporations as well. Doctors that want to do good, like my husband, you know, operates on someone even though they don't have insurance and then has to sue health insurance companies to get paid for the work that he's been trained his whole life to do.
And it is funny. She is so wrapped up in identity and she had no idea who.
For years, Sunny has ruled The View like the Supreme Court of daytime television. Gavel in one hand, moral superiority in the other. She doesn't offer opinions. She delivers verdicts. One wrong take, and you're basically sentenced to permanent social exile, brunch privileges revoked. But this week, the self-appointed Chief Justice of Daytime TV found herself on the other side of the bench. Not debating, not lecturing, staring straight into a $450 million courtroom disaster. One that just happens to feature her own husband. The same legal arena where Sunny spent years scolding politicians, pundits, and anyone who dared fall short of her standards suddenly became the stage for her family's unraveling. No applause sign, no closing argument, just cold, unforgiving reality. And the irony? It was almost poetic. The woman who built her brand on accountability now finds herself trapped in the very system she treated like a prop. The gavel she loved to swing so freely has come crashing down at home. The irony was so thick, you could slice it with a gavel.
Man that will go after white America and talk about them like dogs. That doesn't represent our ideals or values for anyone. And get rid of those people, and this will clear up real quick. So do you have to actually look in the mirror and clean up your own backyard and get the racist people out? Because that's who you allowed in. You allowed black racist on TV who could just go all day and say anything about white people. And I guess lo and behold, they forgot that there's a lot of people at home, white people at home during the day that are not watching your show anymore. So just clean it up.
Yeah, you know, Emily.
Cue the popcorn, because Greg and Tyrus revved their sarcasm engines like they were about to roast Mount Olympus itself. Sunny spent years mastering the art of televised outrage on The View. Outraged, incensed, flabbergasted on command. Anything to seize the moral high ground on a show that often felt less like a discussion and more like a verbal cage match. But now her husband is allegedly tangled in a financial fiasco so massive it makes FTX look like a neighborhood bake sale. And suddenly, the tone changes. It's no longer about righteous lectures or instant verdicts. Now it's about privacy, about due process, about waiting for the facts. How convenient. The woman who never hesitated to pass judgment now finds herself playing defense. The sass evaporates. The courtroom confidence goes silent. The gavel drops, quietly, behind closed doors. The hypocrisy here isn't subtle. It's so thick you could spread it with a shovel.
Hostin's obsession with race gets thrown back in her face. Today's video comes to us from Sunny Hostin. Sounds like a town. We're in Sunny Hostin. She was on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show dedicated to researching celebrity ancestry. For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners from...
When someone else is under fire, Sunny unleashes righteous fury with barely concealed contempt. Verdict first, facts later. But when her own husband lands in the hot seat, crickets. The loudest legal voice on The View suddenly rediscovers the power of silence. Remarkable restraint. Truly inspiring. And then came Greg and Tyrus. Two men armed with enough sarcasm to power a small nation, smelling hypocrisy like blood in the water. They weren't about to let an opportunity like this slip by. They tore in with the enthusiasm of wolves at a buffet, carving up the double standard with jokes so sharp that they didn't even need punchlines. Silence may be golden, but hypocrisy? That's comedy gold.
Makes Sunny Hostin, who thinks climate change caused the solar eclipse, the dumbest of them all. Because everyone knows the moon caused the eclipse, which is controlled by the View's gravitational pull.
The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Greg Gutfeld, part sniper, part stand-up comic. Might as well have popped champagne on air. And Tyrus? He showed up like someone who brought marshmallows specifically for the credibility bonfire. This wasn't commentary. It was a celebration of irony that let's talk about that $450 million courtroom scandal, shall we? According to reports and a swarm of fiery social media threads, Sunny's husband is now caught in a legal nightmare, so massive it makes Enron look like a clerical error. The allegations are serious, ranging from financial misconduct to potential fraud. Alleged, of course, but explosive enough to dominate headlines. That what's missing? Sunny's voice. The woman who never met a scandal she couldn't prosecute on daytime television suddenly has less to say about accountability than a broken Alexa. It's as if her inner prosecutor was unplugged and replaced with dead air. No monologues, no lectures, no moral sermons, just silence. And that's where the irony gets rich. This is the same Sunny who built a career dissecting other people's legal messes like a hawk spotting roadkill. When a Republican so much as misfiles paperwork, she's already delivering the closing argument. But when the smoke is rising from her own backyard, suddenly it's not the time to speculate. That's not restraint. That's performance art. Gutfeld wasted no time turning his segment into a roast cleverly disguised as commentary, highlighting the double standard with jokes sharp enough to do actual damage. Tyrus followed with blunt force sarcasm, saying what viewers at home were already thinking but weren't allowed to hear on The View. In the end, the contrast said more than any punchline ever could. When accountability is selective, hypocrisy becomes unavoidable. And when hypocrisy shows up on cable news, Greg Gutfeld is always ready with the spotlight and the match.
Their brains are small. But who's the dumbest one of all? True, none of them are in Mensa, but who's the most densa? Perhaps it's Sunny who mastered the art of making idiots look smart. Now The View could ask a mirror who's the dumbest one of all, but there's no way that glass doesn't shatter. So
if hypocrisy were an Olympic sport, Sunny wouldn't just medal. She'd be standing on the podium wrapped in gold while the anthem played twice. Greg Gutfeld tore into the double standard with the giddy joy of a kid ripping open presents on Christmas morning, while Tyrus loomed in the background sharpening his verbal machete. And when he swung it, he didn't miss. Tyrus, never one to pull punches or soften edges, delivered zingers with the calm confidence of a man who's watched far too much daytime TV to be impressed anymore. He didn't merely point out the scandal. He sliced straight through the smugness, the self-righteous posturing, and the collapsing credibility that came with it. When the queen of condescension loses her crown to a scandal this massive, you can count on Tyrus to be standing there with a velvet pillow, ready to collect it. And then there were the View co-hosts, the self-appointed guardians of outrage, who went from fiery crusaders for justice to a monastery of silence in record time. Joy Behar, usually loud enough to register on satellite radar, suddenly looked like she'd seen a ghost. Whoopi Goldberg, long-armed with morality monologues and theatrical sighs, could barely muster a shrug. Apparently, when Sunny's name appears anywhere near a legal docket, the outrage meter short-circuits instantly. These are the same people who once turned a conservative mispronouncing a word into a multi-segment emergency broadcast. Panels, lectures, performative gasps. But now, nothing. Not a sermon, not a scolding, not even a dramatic eye roll. Funny how accountability works until it knocks on your own door.
Sure, all that, and the price of butter. Sunny gets the game ball. If it wasn't for her, asking that question, it might have been a closer election. Listen, they're bitter, they're angry, they're entitled. They also should be. This should have been a reset for everyone who pushed lies and misinformation for the last. They call them Hitler. They call these things. America rejected them, and instead of coming back and saying we lied, they instead are now doubling down. So let her keep doing it, because if she keeps that up, we're going to keep getting the Senate and probably the House and the White House, because people see right through your lies. So keep doing what you're doing. Game ball.
A $450 million courtroom disaster involving one of their own. And suddenly everything becomes complicated, nuanced, context-dependent. How incredibly convenient. Meanwhile, social media didn't wait for permission. It ignited like gasoline on open flame. Memes flooded timelines. Twitter showed zero mercy. And right on cue, Greg Gutfeld seized the moment to land his real punch. Not just at Sunny, but the entire media ecosystem protecting her. With surgical precision, Gutfeld called out the classic elite double standard. Accountability for thee, but never for me. Public figures who preach transparency love the spotlight, right up until it swings their way. The moral high ground, it turns out, is only comfortable when it's solid beneath your feet, not when it starts collapsing in real time. That in his trademark deadpan delivery. Gutfeld noted the irony of a show built on truth and tough conversations suddenly coming down with a severe case of selective laryngitis. Loud about everyone else's scandals. Whisper quiet when the microscope turns inward. Then came Tyrus, dry, brutal, effortless, that he mocked the absurdity of Sunny playing on-air legal authority while reportedly navigating carefully worded statements about her husband's misunderstood finances off camera. The contrast was impossible to miss. One moment, the gavel of moral judgment. The next, a masterclass in cautious silence. The only thing more disorienting than the allegations themselves was watching Sunny's moral compass spin wildly, faster than a career politician strapped to a lie detector.
End of time. You're right. Anytime she says something stupid, I'm going to go, slave owner! Kat, I just watched that. That's the second time I've watched that. She was tipped off beforehand, right? Because they had to tell her before, so she had time to regroup. They wouldn't just surprise. Really? You think? No?
I don't know. I feel like she could have maybe done better. Okay, here's the thing. One thing, and I would have even actually not give her any is she said, well, I guess that's just what they did back then.
Yeah.
She should have followed that up with saying something along the lines of, and I understand that that's a departure from the way I've talked about this before.
And just to top it all off, The View behaved as if the entire thing never existed. No mention, no acknowledgement, not even a vague hint. This is a show that can dedicate 20 uninterrupted minutes to analyzing Taylor Swift's dating history, yet somehow couldn't find a single spare minute to address a $450 million courtroom implosion unfolding in their own co-host orbit. Call it dignity if you want, or call it what it really looks like, avoidance. I'll let you decide. Gutfeld wrapped his segment with a moment of beautifully weaponized irony, casually wondering out loud whether Sunny might like to stop by his show someday to talk about accountability. The sarcasm wasn't subtle, it was industrial strength. Tyrus didn't even need words. That slow lean in and knowing grin said everything. We warned you. But here's the bigger takeaway. This isn't just about Sunny Hostin. This mess exposes a much wider problem festering across mainstream media. The same voices that endlessly sermonize about justice, ethics, and responsibility suddenly freeze when their own reflection shows up in a mirror. They treat the law like sacred text, right up until someone notices their rules are printed on paper thinner than their excuses.
Not even that. And The View, you don't need to find Trumpers. You need to fire your race baiters.
Yeah.
You need to fire the two races. You've had people. You had a McCain on there. You've had people on there before, and you ran them off. So the racist ones who want to stick to this, Whoopi and Sunny, and the, was it Bette Midler? What's her name? Yeah, broke-ass Bette Midler. Fire them and bring people in. Maybe you could get McCain to come back.
Sunny's defenders are quick to argue that she shouldn't be held responsible for her husband's actions. And in theory, that argument holds water. But let's be honest. This is the very same person who spent years putting political opponents and their families under a microscope, dissecting personal lives with the enthusiasm of a true crime host. Now that the spotlight has swung her way, she's suddenly calling for nuance, patience, and compassion. That's not just hypocrisy. It's irony stacked so high it needs its own warning label. And this story isn't cooling off anytime soon. More revelations are almost guaranteed to surface, and Sunny may soon be forced to do more than sit silently through commercial breaks. A public statement? A temporary step away? Or perhaps just an upgraded version of that trademark frozen expression she's perfected over the years. Whatever path she chooses, the damage is already done. Her credibility didn't just crack. It vaporized. Let's not pretend The View was ever a beacon of hard-hitting journalism. But this controversy tore the mask clean off. What's left is a panel scrambling to shield one of their own, operating less like commentators and more like a scripted daytime drama circle. Self-reflection? Don't count on it. These are people who can collide headfirst with their own contradictions and still insist the other side caused the accident. The chances of an honest admission of double standards are about as realistic as watching Sunny personally handle her husband's legal paperwork live on air.
That's not what I read. The true sign of the apocalypse is someone that dumb has a law degree. Worse, if your name has the word sun in it, there's no excuse for not knowing how an eclipse works. But it's no surprise that Joy is the one who understands science. She's been on the science diet for years.
If The View had an emergency mute button for uncomfortable scandals, Sunny would have smashed it so hard the control panel would need counseling. And honestly, her public image depended on it. The woman who built a career delivering courtroom-style sermons and theatrical legal takedowns suddenly transformed into the patron saint of silence. The same host who could stretch a minor political hiccup into a 10-minute lecture somehow lost her voice the moment her husband's $450 million legal mess entered the orbit. Coincidence? Absolutely. And while we're at it, maybe pigs are pitching venture capital ideas. The smug cross-examinations vanished. The legal jargon evaporated. Sunny, once a relentless justice crusader, became the human equivalent of a paused screen. Viewers didn't miss it. They watched as she blinked deliberately, shuffled her note cards, and wore the expression of someone mentally drafting a contingency plan. It was like watching a lawyer attempt interpretive dance during an IRS audit. Every stiff movement, every overly intentional sip from her mug screamed, "Please don't say the word lawsuit." Her body language did all the talking she refused to do. Arms folded tighter than a sealed evidence locker, shoulders rigid enough to shatter glass. One moment, she nodded along like a student at a legal symposium. The next, she stared into space as if ceiling tiles held the answers to attorney-client privilege. It wasn't commentary. It was courtroom mime.
She is shaming descendants of this. Will she continue to do that when she is now one of them, Dana? And it is funny. She is so wrapped up in identity, and she had no idea who she was.
Well, now we understand why she always makes Whoopi get the coffee.
Somewhere between Whoopi's dramatic eye rolls and Joy's off-the-rails tangents, Sunny sat frozen, like she just discovered her husband's bail terms printed neatly across her note cards. Every time the conversation drifted anywhere near corruption, fraud, or public embarrassment, Sunny suddenly developed an intense fascination with the studio floor. That vacant stare wasn't deep reflection. It was a silent plea for spontaneous invisibility. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. Viewers saw it. Twitter saw it. And Greg Gutfeld definitely saw it. Because missing moments like this simply isn't in his DNA. Normally, Sunny can't resist cutting people off with her trademark. Actually, that's not how due process works. But this time, the only thing she's defending is her facial expression. Because now, due process isn't a talking point. It's happening to her own husband in an actual courtroom. The interruptions that once made her the loudest voice at the table are now echoing back like courtroom ghosts, haunting every second of her silence. As she sits. She blinks. She sips from that oversized mug like it's filled with liquid invisibility, hoping if she stays still long enough, the scandal might pass her by. Viewers half expect her to suddenly shout objection, not at a co-host, but at her own reflection. And that silence? It isn't dignified. It isn't classy. It's desperate. A frantic attempt to outlast, outblink, and outsip a scandal far too massive to be ignored.
Anna went in a different direction. But I love the fact that, Manny is younger and he's
How much younger is he?
Just a little bit.
He's like 1 year, isn't he? Like a month or a year or 10 years?
5 years. It's more than a year.
Oh.
Anyway, it's not about me. I think.
Oh, no.
I think that it's very helpful that he's handy, and when we travel, I'm not picking up any bags. He's the one that's hefting them overhead. He throws the garbage out.
Right.
He does the head.
Sorry, Sunny, but you can't cross-examine karma. And that's exactly why Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus delivered the kind of catharsis America didn't even realize it was craving. In a media landscape drowning in double standards and non-stop sanctimony, watching the self-appointed moral referees trip over their own rules feels downright therapeutic. Will Sunny bounce back? Probably. The View has a long track record of forgiving its hosts, as long as they stay loyal to the approved moral script. She may even try to flip this into a redemption arc. Maybe a heartfelt segment. Maybe a TED-style monologue titled, When Justice Hits Too Close to Home. But until then, the memes keep coming. The internet keeps laughing. And Gutfeld and Tyrus keep circling the hypocrisy like vultures armed with punchlines. Because when you spend your career handing out moral verdicts, eventually the gavel swings back. And in Sunny's case, it came down hard enough to knock the smug right out of her highlight reel. The next time The View serves up another lecture on accountability, remember this. The loudest voices are often the quickest to choke on their own words, especially when Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus are waiting in the wings. With the receipts,